Hey everyone, my interview today is with Norman Plotkin. Norman changed his life after cancer and eventually became a hypnotherapist. We talk about what happened to lead him to where he is right now, 7 empowering things to do when you have cancer. He's written a book about this, so he knows some stuff, you guys. Various emotional links to diseases and conditions, and the mind's urge for emotional homeostasis, meaning the mind wants to keep certain things going and feels good when it feels at peace. So I hope you really enjoy this interview. I myself am a hypnotherapist who works all over the world, an entrepreneur, a mom, all that good stuff. You can see more about me and get some free hypnosis files over at my website, drlizhypnosis.com. Let's jump into our interview. Hi, Norman. Welcome to the Hypnotize Me podcast.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. I'm so glad you're here. I love talking to other hypnotherapists and hearing their personal stories and how hypnotherapy helped them heal as well as other people. So I'm happy to jump into this with you this morning.
Me too. I love what I do, and I found my way to this later in life. And if ever someone could find their way to their soul's purpose, I feel like I did.
Wow. Wow. What did you do before?
I worked in state government for 10 years, and then for 15 years was a lobbyist.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That is quite a different profession than hypnotherapy.
I like to refer to it as persuasion of a different sort.
Yes, yes. I have a good friend who's a lobbyist, and I think my perception about it was a little bit different before he became one, because he's really lobbying for services for underprivileged children, for like free school lunches, basically, and getting all the schools set up and keeping the funding going for that. So what?
Yeah, I mean, um, there are common misperceptions. I mean, state government is about who gets what, when, where, why, and how. And if you need something from state government and don't have an advocate in the state capital, you're going to go hungry.
Yeah.
I lobbied for the medical association, the physicians. There's 30 at the time. There were 30,000 physicians in California, and there were continual scope of practice battles. You know, the podiatrists wanted to operate above the ankle, and the psychologists wanted to prescribe, and there were always these battles going on. And of course, the health maintenance organizations wanted to limit the physician's ability to communicate with their patients and have utilization review that was, undertaken by someone with less education than the physician, telling them what they, the physicians what they could and couldn't prescribe, or.
Yes.
And so, but then I went out on my own and I represented automotive, electricity, and petroleum interests. So the kind of the typical thing that people think. Although I had small oil against big oil, I represented the California Independent Petroleum Association. Some of these wildcatters are doing 2 and 3 barrels a day. You know what I mean? So it was mom and pop things, and then electricity service providers against the monopoly utilities, who are very powerful. And then
Yes.
and I represented the automotive aftermarket against the big car companies. So it was a bit of it was a bit of underdog, even though they were in industries that are mature and well developed. But
Fascinating. I'm sure you have
yeah,
so many stories from that era of your life. But
yeah.
how old were you when you became a hypnotherapist?
Well, let's see, 51.
Whoa, really? And what happened? So I know some about your story, that you did get cancer. Were you a hypnotherapist before, or this was the path that led you to be one?
It was the path. The cancer was my shamanic healing crisis. I loved the public policy. I loved the strategy, but the politics. Even though I had to know it, and I did. I ran campaigns for a while just to understand that part of it, how the legislators got there and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very sophomoric. It's very juvenile. I mean, the leadership places two people who hate each other right next to each other just to watch them fight. And, if you disobey the leadership, they make you move your office and all your staff into the broom closet. And
Whoa.
it's just, there's lots of little examples of that. People are very petty
Hmm.
and, and then everybody's got an opinion about it. Right. So when I was the committee consultant to the health committee, I would continually query people out in the real world. I'll be riding the chairlift skiing and say, "Hey, do you have an HMO? What do you think about your healthcare?" And
Uh-huh.
I would just ask questions about, from real people and regular people. But everybody had an opinion about politics, and it's just
Absolutely.
it was just it was very difficult. And so um I got sick, and it was papillary carcinoma, which was thyroid cancer. So it
Mm.
was my throat chakra. See, I
Yeah.
didn't speak for myself. I didn't have my authentic voice. I spoke for others. I wasn't allowed to write a letter to the editor. It might,
Uh-huh.
bear poorly on my clients.
Yeah.
So my throat chakra was blocked, and at the time, I was kind of happy to finally get to, they measured the nodule on my thyroid every 3 months for 2 years.
Wow.
The first doctor to tell me I had cancer was the surgeon who needed informed consent in order to remove my thyroid.
Hmm.
And so I was kind of relieved for that I had an explanation for why I was so flat-footed. I mean, the thyroid controls everything, and I didn't want to play hockey anymore. I couldn't keep up.
Yeah.
I didn't want to ride my mountain bike. All these things, depression was a part of it.
Yeah. People
And
don't realize a lot of plantar fasciitis is due to the thyroid.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
The
thyroid, it
feet.
controls everything. And so I was this little wiry guy that bounced off the walls, my whole life, and suddenly I'm got concrete galoshes, and so
Yeah. They call concrete legs is what they
yeah,
often call them in the thyroid world. Yeah. Concrete
yeah,
legs. You feel like you can't move your legs. Mhm.
yeah. So I was relieved to finally get and then an explanation for why I was feeling the way I was feeling, and then but I was a little put off by the fact that it took me four doctors before they would actually say the C word.
Uh-huh.
But I dutifully went where I was told, and you know, I was just gonna beat this thing, and so because I wanted to air quotes get back to normal,
Hmm.
and the problem was it came back because normal was what made me sick. So
Mm.
I had to find a new normal. And the joke, because my name is Norm, my family called me Normal since I was a little kid. Because when I was 3, my cousin Willie said, "Hey, Normal." I said, "I'm not normal." Right. So uh,
Got it.
yeah. So when Young Frankenstein came out, my friends called me Abby Normal. But um, so the normal was what made me sick. And
Hmm.
so I had a friend who had gotten out of politics, and she opened a yoga studio, and she taught me to meditate and to breathe
Hmm.
I did yoga and Pilates to get my strength back, because 2 rounds of radiation, I was just emaciated
Yeah.
and just completely out of my body, and my marriage didn't survive that. It's always very, very complicated.
It is. Yes.
And so I began to look at the world differently, and teachers began to appear. I read books like Wayne Dyer's The Power of Intention,
Hmm.
Carol Mesa's Anatomy of the Spirit, Deepak Chopra's Quantum Healing, and um, a friend suggested I go to a Hay House conference in Pasadena in 2015,
Hmm.
and I went and I saw all of those and speak and more. Joe Dispenza,
Yeah. I
um,
love Joe Dispenza. Uh-huh.
Greg Braden, Brian Weiss, Dr. Brian Weiss.
Hmm.
So I saw all these folks speak, and I interacted with them, and um, I mean, funny story. The person who had recommended I go there, she was a psychic, because I had these experiences. I've experienced all the clairs, clairaudience, clair Augustus, clairvoyance, and I didn't know what to do with it. I've been sensitive all my life, but listen,
Hmm.
I was raised on a ranch, and I went in the Marine Corps. I worked in the oil fields before college.
Wow.
Men don't expect, intuition is the realm of women.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I didn't understand my gifts. It often created conflict because I would know people, I would know what was on their mind, and it made them uncomfortable. So anyway,
Yeah, I was going
I
to
had,
ask you what you mean by the clairvoyant experiences. Like, how did it come to
oh,
you?
I see, I hear, I taste, I smell.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, one time I was eulogizing a friend who was killed, and I didn't realize I was going to have to speak, but I had a 4-hour drive to get back home, and I was thinking about him, and I came up with 3 uh, scenarios to support the premise that he was a sweet guy, which was, he was tough. He
Mm-hmm.
was a cop and had been in the army, worked in construction, but those who knew him knew he was a sweet guy. And as I gave the 3 examples and then brought it around to the unifying theme of him being a sweet guy, and people were crying, and I got a sweet taste in my mouth.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah, that's an example. And
Yeah.
I've seen scenarios, I see things, I know things. So
Ah,
so I was seeing the psychic to try and understand what was going on with, and she was the one who sent me to the uh,
conference. Okay.
yeah, to the conference, and then she was teaching me about the archangels and what each of them represent, and how you can
Mm-hmm.
call on them and ascended masters, and your higher self for help and whatnot. And so I was trying to make this transition, from I had moved to LA to move away from kind of the drama of the divorce and whatnot, and so I had taken a job as the executive director of a trade association, which was very much like what I'd been doing for the last 25 years. Board relations, and
Mm-hmm.
and that type of stuff. So and they didn't renew my contract after a year, so I'm like, now what? So I'm really searching about what I'm supposed to do. And after reading Wayne Dyer's The Power of Intention,
Mm-hmm.
I realized that what I wanted to do was put myself into the service of others, and in doing so, my life would just fall into place. Right? It's
And did it?
we white knuckle, and we worry about and fret about this, that, and the other thing. But if we just put ourselves into service, things tend to fall into place. So I wrote a letter to Archangel Michael. Dear Archangel Michael, it's Norm here. I have mad skills. People have paid me millions of dollars,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't want to serve corporations and politicians. I want to serve regular people. So please, but I don't know how. Please direct me so that I might be in service to others. Very
Mm-hmm.
truly yours, Norman Plotkin. Took it in the backyard and burned it and gave it to the universe.
Got it.
And then I went back inside into my darkened bedroom, and I sat in the middle of my bed, and I did japa meditation for 15 minutes. Namanarayana.
Okay.
And my
Thank you.
chest,
Because I was like, I wasn't familiar with japa meditation. So that's a good
yeah, yeah.
example. Good.
Yep. And so that's the mantra. It's one of many mantras. Japa meditation is a mantra, and you say them so many times, and sometimes they count them with the beads,
Mm-hmm.
so that you know how many you've done. Anyway, I did it for 15 minutes, and my chest was resonating, and then there's a cool down period. So you sit and you're quiet and still with your eyes closed after you've chanted. And the most powerful, energetic presence I've ever experienced came down the darkened hall through the closed door and stood next to me. And at first I'm like terrified. And then I was made to know not to be terrified, not to even be afraid,
Mm-hmm.
and that everything was going to be just fine. And
Beautiful.
I settled into that for a second. And then just as soon as it had arrived, it was gone. And I opened my eyes and I looked around, and I'm like, wow. So I called my psychic friend, Laura, and I said, Laura, you won't believe it. And I told her the story,
Mm-hmm.
as I just told you. And she said, wait a minute, you wrote a letter to Archangel Michael, then you did japa meditation, and the most powerful energetic force you've ever experienced showed up, and you don't know who it was?
Yeah. That's
And
great.
within a week, I was directed to go to there's some nationally accredited College of Hypnotherapy in Los Angeles.
Yes. Yeah.
And I was guided to go there. I knew someone who knew someone who'd gone there. We had dinner.
Mm-hmm.
I asked questions, and without ever having been hypnotized, well, formally,
Right. Yeah.
we all
If
go
you're
through.
having clairvoyant experiences, you're in a
Yeah,
hypnotic trance for sure.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's right. So without ever having been formally hypnotized by a hypnotherapist, I signed up for this school, 18 months and
Wow.
residency. And so, but you see, when you're divinely guided,
Mhm.
you don't question, you just do. And it's taken me, I had to straddle two worlds. For a while, I covered 16 Western states for a former client, and so I was in state capitals representing an automotive aftermarket company.
Mhm.
And I was doing hypnosis on the shoulders, nights, weekends,
Mhm.
uh, uh, because it was a remote position. I could sneak one or two in during the day if I wasn't engaged in something. So
Yeah, yeah, of course.
then I wrote my first book and went to work as an acquisition editor for my publisher, and
What's
did
an
that for a couple
acquisition
of years.
editor?
I read book proposals and,
Oh, got
and
it.
interviewed potential authors, and
And you had never done that before? You just sort of looked into it?
well, I went through I
Looked,
went
quote
through
unquote.
yeah, I've been writing all my adult life, but I tried 3 years to write my book and couldn't get anywhere because when it's yours, it's hard. I was never allowed to be in my writing before.
Mhm.
And so this was about my cancer experience and how I might share what I learned with others so it could ease their burden, because cancer, when you're in it, it's an awful thing.
It is. So
And
that's your first book was Take Charge of Your Cancer.
correct.
Okay.
And so what I did was I joined the author incubator because I hated everything I was writing. And so with a coach, I learned why I felt that way. And I had a 90-day schedule, and
Mhm.
every Monday I had 10,000 words due. And so
Mm.
so that accountability, while also understanding author flow state
Mhm.
and why we have writer's block and all of these things, and how to organize the book, and how to make it meaningful to others, how to create an avatar,
Mhm.
and so that your ideal reader is feeling the love with which you wrote the book.
Yes.
And so, I knocked it out, the manuscript, in 90 days, and then of course there was editing
Mhm.
and artwork and all these other things. But then I got picked up by Morgan James, the New York publisher, uh, and so a lifelong dream came true. Plus, and I had thought about coaching and
Mhm.
using hypnotherapy with cancer clients, because I'm certified in hypnotherapy for cancer clients.
Mhm.
Um, but it's just really difficult when people are in the middle of it. They're not thinking, you know.
They're really not.
Well,
Yeah.
they're not thinking. Yeah, I mean, they just want to be told where to go, and they're in trance. They're triggered by past traumas,
Yes.
and not sure who to believe, and there's overwhelming information, and so
There
anyway,
is. Yeah.
so I put it out there. It's the 7 proven steps to healing and recovery. I didn't make any of these up. They're the ones I stumbled on, the ones
Mhm.
I found my way to. And they are 7 empowering things that you can do, because getting a second opinion and going where you're told to go it's not empowering. And, it's
Mm.
10 p.m.
Could you share one or two with us?
I'll share all 7. Yeah.
Oh, great.
Um,
Okay.
yeah. Radically change your diet,
Mhm.
deepen your spirituality, learn to meditate, commune with your subconscious mind with hypnotherapy.
Mhm.
Um, uh, Take charge, because you're the one with the most skin in the game.
Mhm.
Release your repressed emotions. Holding on to stuff in the past is a burden that's too high for anyone. And finally, have a reason to live. Don't just not want to die.
Yes. Yeah, beautiful. I see like there's a couple of those I think that people may struggle with in terms of meditation or communing with their subconscious mind, and ask like how. I mean, do you think people will find the book if they need it, if they're open to it, or do you feel like it's
Well, yes, I gave it to the world, and those who need me find me. And not this last Thanksgiving, but the Thanksgiving before, I was it was the morning of, and I was getting things together. I cook. I love to cook, and so I was getting everything ready for a day of cooking and family and sharing. And um, I got an email from a guy
Mhm.
unsolicited, and it said, I'm on my 5th month of chemo holiday. My doctor says I'm an outlier. He can't explain it, and I owe it all to you because I read your book.
Mm-hmm.
And that made it all worth it.
Yeah,
My
absolutely.
son, who's about to be 18, he saw a 5-star review by a woman who bought the book for her mother who had breast cancer and was very grateful and gushed over it. And he saw the 5-star review and he screenshot it and he texted it to me. And I said, pretty cool, huh? If one person is better than because they read my book, then the whole cancer was worth it.
Yes. Yeah, it's truly an act of service.
So those who need it find it. I don't push myself on anyone.
Mm-hmm.
People hear my story, they read my book, or they know of my book, and they refer their friends to me, people they know. And like it was really hard in the beginning
Mm-hmm.
to have someone who's got rectal cancer and they're bleeding frequently.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, I can help. And they say, no, I'm right.
Yeah.
I'm like, are
Uh-huh.
you sure? Are you sure? If money's a problem, I'll do it pro bono. No, I'm right. You're just going to write it out? Yeah.
Yeah, I've
Uh,
had the same experience. I have. And I have a couple of them actually, free hypnosis for like before cancer surgery, preparing specifically. And
I do pre-surgery, post-surgery. Yeah.
yeah. And
Very powerful.
and it is downloaded a lot. But occasionally I made it originally because a friend was diagnosed with breast cancer and she wanted it. And I said, absolutely, I'll make you one. And then I had another friend who had a melanoma and she loved it. And so I did another one and I put it out there for free for people who want it. But it is interesting sometimes when I offer it to someone and they say, no, that's okay. I'm not into that. It's like, all right, part of me assumes they're going to find their own path. Like
Well,
if they're
yeah.
ready to do this path, if they feel like it's really going to be helpful to them, they will dive into it. If not, they'll find a different path.
Well, cancer is a message. And if you don't hear it, you get reassigned. I mean, it's that simple.
What's reassigned?
Well, think about it. You transition to the other side.
Oh, reassigned. Okay, got it.
Yeah. And you
Okay,
come
got
back to
it.
learn.
I was like,
And you come back
reassigned
to
to
learn.
what? I mean, sometimes people get a different type of cancer if they don't listen, right? Or it's
Well, that's true, but ultimately they'll be reassigned because they have to come back and learn the lesson that they're not learning. There's a lesson. What I learned from my cancer is that every time I find myself in my next embarrassing situation, I just look up to the divine and say, let me learn this quickly.
That's a good statement. Yes, let me learn this quickly. Yeah.
Right? Because
Yes.
so that I can get on to the next lesson. It's a series of lessons. We come here, it's a very dense frequency here on Earth. I don't think emotion exists anywhere else in the universe. And souls come here to learn lessons. And when we learn one, we elevate to the next level of lessons.
Yes.
And if we stay stuck in the same lesson, then we get reassigned and we come back to learn that lesson until we do learn it. So it was really hard. I had dreams of a clinic and a nonprofit and raising money, and I just it wore me down. So instead, I have worked really hard at building my practice, and so I have 30 appointments this week, and I love what I do, and 1 in 500 people I have some weirdness with, because you can't get along with, you can't help everyone. There are just,
Yeah.
I can usually, that's why I do a free consultation, just establish that there's rapport initially. But that 1 out of 500 always brings me down a little bit because I want to help everybody. But then that's my lesson, right? Okay.
Yes.
You can't help everyone. So you just, and It's just because there's fresh, because I had that 1 in 500 recently.
It's funny because I just talked to a doctor who's a sleep specialist last week. And so he's looking for someone who does CBTI, which is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And I'm certified in that. And I typically combine it with hypnosis. But he did ask me, like, how successful are you? And I said, well, very, like 95% successful. I mean, CBTI, it's not rocket science here. It's actually pretty easy. But I said, but occasionally I have a case that I'm not successful with, and where, it just doesn't work for them, or they try everything, or we do this. And it happens to everybody, I think.
Well, resistance, I mean, I'm really good at recognizing resistance. And when you call people on it, most of the time they're like, oh, I had no idea. Some people, their hackles come up, and the case in point here is like, she was very argumentative and confrontational, and then projected all of that on me. Mm-hmm. So I just give her whole money back and be done and whatnot. But the CBT is, it's really important. What I find is, I'm not a licensed psychologist, but I studied it intensively. And so what I do is just teach people about the triangle.
Oh, yeah.
I don't try and do the cognitive behavioral therapy, but I teach them the triangle, and I do the white elephant visualization and then change it to a pink panther. And when they realize how quickly they can change their thoughts, it empowers them.
Oh, yes, it does. Absolutely, it does.
I wish it was taught more widely, in life skills in school, because people, I routinely hear, well, I can't help how I feel. I'm like, yeah, you can.
Yeah.
So you know what? Don't not feel it. Feel it. Okay, that makes you angry. Allow yourself to feel the anger for a moment. Okay, now move on to the feeling that you want to have. And I teach people the Reader's Digest version of the Course in Miracles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Love is your birthright. It resides in your heart center. The opposite is fear. In any moment, you can choose.
Right. Yes.
In any moment, you can choose love or fear. It's your choice.
Mm-hmm.
And love gives rise to all positive emotions. It's God energy. And fear gives rise to all negative emotions. So in any moment, and then I throw in the Dr. Frankel's space between stimulus and response, and you get to choose what kind of human being you show up as. You can show up with your power and show up lovingly, and that doesn't mean you're a doormat. It means that you show up with love. You just bring. I have them come up with an icon image or a picture that represents love, and then just bring it into their heart space, and to train themselves to do it 40 times a day, because they have to untrain themselves from having that fear response. We're triggered. Fears all around us right now, and it's really, really bad. But
it's true. But it's interesting to see the variations on that. And often it's very clear someone living in just absolute fear all the time versus someone who feels absolute peace on the other side. And then, I mean, it's been like I don't know. It's sort of like a fun room with all those mirrors going on. It's like you see every single variation from fear to peace. And it has been really interesting.
Well, some resist the fear, and there are gradations of people's ability to resist the fear. It's real. Like, I've just come to a place where I recognize the patterns. If they fall into the short, choppy breathing, and I teach them about the autonomic nervous system. And so I do a lot of coaching.
Yeah. I mean, I think people sometimes have the misconception of hypnotherapy that there's not going to be a lot of talking. And it's a lot of talking and a lot of education and coaching and working with your thoughts and looking at them and saying, all right, how are we changing these? And then the hypnosis, obviously you can do lots of different things with hypnosis in terms of reprogramming. Or going back to, where did these originate from? And let's rewrite those beliefs.
Yes. So the first half is the cognitive conversation, and then the second half is the trance work. And so I'm doing the triangle in the cognitive portion and connecting dots. I do a deep
Yeah.
dive into their history, their
Hmm.
family structures, and their childhood. And it's fertile ground to understand where these things originated. And
Yes.
when I connect the same thing that made me a really good policy analyst and lobbyist makes me a good hypnotherapist, because I connect dots. I was taught, and what I see when people come to me who've been to other hypnotherapists and therapists generally
Mm-hmm.
and doctors generally, they treat symptomatically. And
Yes.
if you don't do a deeper dive and go for cause, you're playing whack-a-mole.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm going to disagree with you a little bit here. I think when someone's ready to go deeper, we go deeper, and they will often show up and do that. If someone wants to just treat the symptoms, I'm willing to do that, but I do give the caution, well, let's see what happens. This may be the only level you need, and that's okay. Or if you want to go to a deeper level, it comes back. Or if it comes back, we go to the deeper level. I mean, for some people, myself, I'd prefer to just go deep. Let's just knock this out. Okay, like let's
Yeah,
go there first.
yeah,
But I
yeah.
do
That's me.
recognize that some people are not really ready for that. They do want the more surface level.
Yeah, I know. But you know what? I see that as resistance, and so I'm a little firm. I try and push them past their comfort level.
Uh-huh.
I'm not for everyone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and the right people find us, right?
It is
Based
true.
on what our
Yes.
style is. But I'm very upfront. So I'm seeing a lot of teens right now.
Ooh.
I'm seeing a lot of teens, and it's been a very trying couple of years. And I've got some collegiate athletes
Mm-hmm.
who were stars at the statewide level in high school, and now are having really weird, unexplained fall down and vomit 30 yards from the finish line in the track star, or
Whoa.
can't do on the diving board.
Mm-hmm.
There's an arm routine that you do you're faced backwards, and
Yeah.
you do this arm routine before you launch, and like freezing and can't doing the arm routine, which is the initiation of the dive, right?
Yes.
I mean, these are just a couple of examples, and they're seeing sports therapists and everything, but not getting any better. And so, like, you would just go in deep. So what I've found is that even with young people, um, the first session I do is an introduction, because their conscious mind is going to hover,
Mm-hmm.
and so I let them feel it and experience it. And I don't try and do too much in that first session, kind of a flyover of the goals that we hope to achieve, and a visualization of achieving it, months out, feel it in your body as if you already have it now. And then in the second session, I regress to childhood,
Mm-hmm.
and trigger thoughts of their childhood home, and, then ask them to go to between 3 and 8 years old, and just kind of, uh, see what was going on, and when these problems might have started, and how are you feeling, and and then I connect them with that inner child, right? And so, and the third one is kind of cathartic. I take them into what we call the garden of life,
Mm-hmm.
and I have them rake up all the dead old leaves of things that have hurt them, or people that have hurt them, or things they don't like about themselves, and to rake it up into a big pile and light it on fire, and then and then we plant some new seeds. And so that
Beautiful. Love
that
that.
kind of systematic groundwork opens the door then to begin to freestyle into wherever they want to go.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. I really love that. So, could you tell us what is your second book about? The Mastermind, Master Life.
Well, it's the book I wanted to write first, except I had to get the cathartic thing out of me.
Got it. Yeah.
I had to get the cancer thing out of me, right? It was kind of a complete, that's the full circle. So the second book, Mastermind, Master Life, is about hypnosis and the subconscious mind.
Mm.
What is hypnosis? What's the history of it? What does science say about it? And how can you apply it in your life?
Okay.
Yeah, there's so many misconceptions. People have seen television and Las Vegas shows, and
Yeah.
the writers in Hollywood and television, it's fertile ground, right? They always
Mm-hmm.
take artistic license, and they take a little bit of, like, the teacup and Get Out, right? She tinkled the teacup, and he went to the sunken place. Like, well,
Yeah.
it doesn't quite work that way, but they took a little bit of, you know, suggestibility framework and ran with it, right?
Yeah.
So it was important to me, after having talked to thousands, to give a resource out there that was approachable. It's just 120 pages. It's written for the person who needs some science, but not so much science that bores them.
Mm-hmm.
The history of hypnosis, but not so much,
That it bores them.
exactly.
Right.
And how can you apply it
Mm-hmm.
at the end, which is, meaningful. Like these were the areas that it works great. And I point them to Google Scholar,
Mm-hmm.
where they can go and pull up. There is tons and tons of research
There is.
on pain, on cancer, on IBS.
Yes.
I have IBS and other, autoimmune.
Mm-hmm.
I've done some awesome. I'm so proud of myself, if I may toot my own horn, on the work I've done with autoimmune. Fibromyalgia, 9 years, tried
Yes.
everything. Doctors just gave pain pills. In 6 sessions, we lifted it and she got her life back. And I see her now on social media, living a full life. And it
Mm-hmm.
pleases me to no end that, after the 3rd session, we lifted it. I had her do an arm stiffening and let go, and
Mm-hmm.
all of these dramatic things. And then I gave her 2 weeks to kind of process. And then I pinged her and said, you ready for the next session? She goes, yeah. I'm like, what would you like to work on? And I held my breath, and she texted back, motivation. I've been depressed for so long, I don't know how to get my butt out of bed. I'm like, woohoo.
Yeah.
Good. So she was over the autoimmune pain,
Mm-hmm.
and she needed motivation to get up out of bed and go to attack the world. And so I'm like, yes, this is the kind of stuff that lights me up.
It does. Absolutely. Yes, I've had cases like that as well. And it does feel so good to be able to help someone on that level where it's like they have a hard time working and they're incapacitated sometimes. And it's like they can get their life back, which feels amazing.
Yeah. And they don't know why.
Yes, right. It is so fascinating to me. Before I was a hypnotherapist, I think there was a part of me that assumed that parents were pretty much responsible for everything. As you can imagine, like a clinical psychologist training, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty common
Yeah.
belief. But after I began doing hypnosis and going deeper and looking at all these events that sometimes contribute to these subconscious beliefs that then we gather evidence for and form someone's life and cause health conditions and all kinds of stuff, I realized like it's not just parents, it's all kinds of stuff that happens to people, traumatic things that maybe even they didn't consider traumatic at the time.
I know. I tell people it can be, you don't have to see someone die in front of you. It could be a bitter disappointment.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It could be a mean teacher, like, or another kid who's really just being a kid at the time, but it affected them. It made me feel very good as a parent, to tell you the truth. I was like, okay, I am not responsible for everything here.
I know it is a big responsibility being a parent, but it's not family structure is important. Birth order is important.
It is.
But the events, that, like, it's always so funny. I had this one young man, he's in his early 20s, and he was fixated on having had a psychedelic experience in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And he was so racked with guilt. And because he didn't,
for what?
He'd done it several times, and then he had a bad trip.
Oh.
He told his parents, and he was feeling, it was really the anxiety that he had over his parents. They fought terribly, and they finally divorced, and he was an only child, and
Mm-hmm.
he saw and heard a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I said, what is it about that experience that stands out? And he couldn't articulate it. I said, well, we have bad experiences all the time. And he couldn't articulate why that one was particularly bad. I said, you're picking one tree in the forest and fixating on it right now. Let's dive deeper and find out what. And it turns out he was constantly in fight or flight. Again, I bring people back to an understanding of their autonomic nervous system and homeostasis. I teach them about the subconscious mind's desire for a psychological homeostasis, right? You don't have to keep learning how to ride a bike.
Right.
You don't have to keep learning how to shift a stick shift. You learn it, and you give it. Athletes and top performers and musicians, they give it to the subconscious mind. They practice, and then they go into a zone.
Yes.
It's very trance-like when they perform. And so when you can have this experience that is traumatic, and you create a response, a defense mechanism, a response to it, a behavioral response, that event is long gone. The person may even be dead, and you're still guarding against this. It's never going to happen again. So you have this maladaptive behavior that was created for this one time situation, but it's like controlling your life. Quote Dr. Joe Dispenza, we have 60 to 70,000 thoughts every day, and 90% of them are the same as they were yesterday. And if I ask you, well, why do you do that? And you say, well, 10 years ago, this happened. You don't remember the details correctly. In fact, you would recount it probably incorrectly. What you remember is how it made you feel.
Yeah.
You had an experience that created a feeling that was imprinted in your body.
Yes.
And so now you're guarding against this, and you are stuck in this behavior when it's not even the way you remember it. So you're living from an unreliable past that's creating this predictable future that's robbing you of your precious present moment.
Yeah.
When you explain it that way to them, it's unlike anything they've been told before, and they begin to see their patterns.
That's how change happens.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a beautiful conversation, and we are coming to the end of our time. Could you please let people know how to find you?
Yeah, my name is my brand. I'm normanplotkin.com, NormanPlotkin.com. I also have mastermindmasterlife.com, which is where I offer some things. The normanplotkin.com is strictly my hypnotherapy practice and all things hypnotherapy. Mastermind, Master Life, I have some other offerings like coaching and writing coaching, and even tarot. I study tarot under a psychologist who's written 5 books on tarot and psychology.
Wonderful. We didn't even talk about tarot. That's wonderful.
It's very Jungian, and the unconscious gateway and the archetypes and stuff. So
yes,
perhaps another episode. But
yes, yeah.
Those are my websites. So I do hypnotherapy both in person and by Zoom. I've done hypnotherapy with people all over the world, and I also on Saturday nights at 7:30 Pacific, I lead virtual group meditations by Zoom. And right now we're working on meditations and the meridians. Work with the acupuncturist. We're going through an explanation and lecture on the meridians, and then I lead a meditation afterwards.
Oh, fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, very cool.
All right. So both of those links will be in the show notes for listeners. And again, thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure interviewing you.
Oh, likewise. Thank you for the opportunity.
I hope you truly enjoyed today's episode. Remember that you can get free hypnosis downloads over at my website, drlizhypnosis.com, DRLIZ hypnosis.com. I work all over the world doing hypnosis. So if you're interested in working with me, please schedule a free consultation over at my website, and we'll see what your goals are and if I can be of service to you in helping you reach them. Finally, if you liked today's episode, please subscribe to the podcast or tell a friend. That way, more and more people learn about the power of hypnosis. All right, everyone, have a wonderful week. Peace. This podcast is not mental health treatment, nor should it replace mental health treatment. If you need therapy or hypnotherapy, please seek treatment from a trained professional.